The Athletic, on the Connor Happer Show, on 1620 The Zone.
You can play.
1620 The Zone, Connor Happer Show. Austin Jacobson in for the Hap today. And joining us, good friend of the program, Mitch Sherman of The Athletic. Mitch, very excited to talk with you and hear your thoughts on things happening out in Lincoln. How are you doing today? Everything good on this cooler Wednesday?
I'm well, yes. Thanks, Austin.
Perfect. We'd love to hear that. All right, so want to get into what we saw, or what you saw specifically from Saturday's practice. What did we not know that we now know about the Husker football team coming out of that glorified big scrimmage in front of a couple of fans that put some $25 down?
Yeah, that's a good question. Considering that it was early in camp and they were just in half pads, and we really just saw a few series of real, it wasn't even real football because, like I said, they were wearing helmets and shoulder pads. I don't know that there was like a huge amount to learn. For me, it was more getting a sense of the roster, having some questions answered about who was on the 120-man roster. That in itself is somewhat interesting, and I have a story out today on The Athletic about the position-by-position depth and experience that Nebraska's got in camp. 120 players is not the full roster like it is for a lot of college programs. There's 20 to 25 players who are at home waiting for school to start on August 26th before they're able to join the team. And there's some scholarship players among that group. Yeah, some injured players, but even some healthy scholarship players. So you see, the way Matt Rule runs his program, he talks about all players having an opportunity, and then he backs that up with the way that they put the 120-player roster together when camp opened here last week. So for me, one of the big questions I had going in was really just who was there. And, all of that was answered, and you can see it for the most part, in print today. Nebraska doesn't officially disclose a roster. So, there are a couple spots on there that I'm not entirely sure about, but I think I checked off all the numbers at practice on Saturday. That was kind of my focus. And of course, going in and getting a sense of the way that the quarterbacks were running things, was at the top of my mind. And I think we all saw that Dylan Raiola is he's in command. He's the number one guy.
You mentioned a little bit about that 120 roster. I think there was a bit of, assumption from general public, Husker fans and college football fans alike, that if you weren't a part of that 120 entering your camp or at the start of week one in the season, it was likely you were going to see a lot of these players enter the transfer portal. But it sounds like that might not be the case from what you observed.
Well, when school opens on the 26th, which is the Monday of game week, then everybody else can come in. And you're talking of the healthy players, maybe another 15 to 20. There may be an instance or two among that group where you find a player that rises up and becomes someone who is more than just a member of the roster, but a player who can contribute. They're probably not the priority candidates to enter the transfer portal, just because where are they going to go? There are not going to be FBS programs beating down the door for Nebraska's 130th player. Let's be clear about that. But there's some intrigue in who stays home at this time of year, and the portal is what happens with Nebraska in the portal. I think is going to be more determined by how the season plays out and how it impacts the guys who are there in camp right now.
From Saturday's news cycle as well, it felt like there was a lot of love for Dylan Raiola. People talked a lot about the high energy. I felt special teams was a bit quiet when you kind of rebuttal and revisit what we saw Saturday. Did you see what special teams will look like moving forward? And especially on those kick returns, did you get maybe a clear glimpse as to who could be returning kicks and punts for the upcoming season?
There wasn't a lot of kick return work, certainly not anything live. They're going to scrimmage this Saturday, and we'll be on the outside. Have to hear reports from Matt Rule and the players after the scrimmage. Rule will talk on Saturday morning when they're finished scrimmaging, and there'll be more that they do in terms of returns on this next Saturday. saw Ja'Cory Barney out there. He's going to be catching kicks. Isaiah Garcia Castaneda is another guy to watch, but that's just a couple, and that's stuff that we mainly knew from the spring game and watching spring practice. This wasn't a practice on Saturday night where special teams were on the center stage just because of where they're at in camp. The kickers got their work, the punters got their work. They stretched out their legs, but as far as the return specialists, nothing beyond just catching some balls that were in the air. They're certainly not facing gunners and would-be tacklers. We'll find that out as camp goes along. On the kicking front, though, Nebraska's still without Tristan Alvano. It's returning starter at kicker, and we got to see Nico Automanelli and John Hull, who are the two kickers in camp right now. And they look fine. They hit the field goals that they attempted. Again, not really with a live rush or anything like that. And then the punters too got some work in. Brian Buschini, who's the 2-year returning starter, and then freshman Camden Cook, who's intriguing because he's the son of Nebraska great Sam Cook. So that'll be something to watch. I mean, Buschini clearly is the leader as a senior to keep this job, but he was inconsistent last year, and if that's going to continue to be the case, then they're going to give Camden Cook a look.
Speaking with Mitch Sherman of The Athletic today on 1620 The Zone, Connor Happer Show. A lot of media attention, of course, yesterday, too. Big news with injuries. I want to start on the positive side first. With that defensive line, Terrence Knighton had a lot of good things to say yesterday. Cam Lenhart also, as you noted, too, he looks big. He looks like he's ready to come back full force. Does it feel like the defensive line is going to take the burden of pressure for the Black Shirts, at least at the start of this season, kind of feeling maybe like an anchor to be able to support this defense through that early run?
Right. I mean, that's always the hope with the defense, is that you can have that anchor up front and you don't have to trick an opponent. You can just line up and be able to go toe to toe right against an opponent in the Big Ten. And obviously you're going to want to do things with the back group. For Nebraska, it's a back 8 because they play a 3-3-5. But the defensive line, if it can set the tone, then you're several steps ahead of where you would otherwise be as an 11-man group. And Nebraska has a defensive line to do that. There's position rankings out among national publications that have Nebraska among the top 10 defensive lines, even the top 5. I think Phil Steele has Nebraska as the number 5 defensive line in the country. That's eye-opening, and I don't think it's necessarily off base. I mean, you look at Nash Hutmacher, Ty Robinson, and Jamari Butler as a front 3, the starting group, and then you take, say, Riley Van Poppel, Elijah Judy, and Cam Lenhart as your next group. There's not a lot of drop-off there. Nebraska has depth, it has experience, it has size, it has strength, it has the ability to rush the passer, it has seemingly the ability to stop the run. So really everything you're looking for in a defensive line is there with this group, and credit to Terrence Knighton for the job that he's done and really turning this unit around, because it wasn't viewed as a strength for Nebraska a year ago when he started work with them, or a little over a year ago.
Of course, the newest addition to the defense is John Butler, defensive backs coach. And when he comes halfway through the middle of the offseason and now enters in, I thought he had some interesting comments yesterday, especially talking about Tony White's scheme and saying, when you put 5 defensive backs on the field, how could you not want a job as a defensive backs coach there? Do you get the sense that he is in coherence with what Tony White's scheme is, or has there been maybe some changes that have already come to that defensive backfield?
I think they're looking at some different things. I think he's going to put his mark on it. There are going to be some things that are probably done differently with John Butler in charge than what it would have been if Nebraska had remained with Evan Cooper or any other coach who had come in. His Butler's style is I think going to be evident in the way the defensive backs play. Like, for instance, here at the beginning of camp, and we saw Saturday night, Marquise Buford, who's played primarily safety in his career, got a little bit of time at corner early in his days in Lincoln. He was playing corner. Tommy Hill was out of that practice. It was just a load management thing with Tommy. They know that he's the number 1 cornerback on this roster. You don't need to get him hurt or worn down at all before the season gets here. So not at all unexpected or alarming that Tommy Hill was sitting out of some of that workout. But to see Buford at corner, that raised eyebrows for me. I wonder, is he someone that they're going to look at because they don't necessarily have an experienced second cornerback, and he would give them that. So I think a different set of eyes is what John Butler provides as a coach in that area of the defense, and it'll be interesting to see, as we get further along in August, and of course when Nebraska gets on the field on August 31st, exactly what kind of a look that secondary provides for opponents that may or may not be different than what we saw last year in Tony White's first season.
Mitch Sherman of The Athletic joining us today on 1620 The Zone for the Connor Happer Show. Sad news, obviously, yesterday with someone around the metro area suffering another knee injury. Teddy Prochazka done for the season, as told by Matt Rule. Do you think we've seen the last of Teddy Prochazka, maybe in a Husker uniform or maybe even suiting up to further his career? Obviously, maybe too soon to talk about it now, but what have you gained in intel on that and just the mentality of what young Teddy is going through?
I think he'll attempt to come back. One of the things that I wondered immediately, and Matt Rule answered this, was this the same knee? Because he hurt a knee early in his career, had ACL surgery. If you see a guy have that injury repeat, and it did to Thomas Fedoni, and he came back from it. So even that is possible, but it's the other knee. So, now he'll have surgery and both of his knees will have been repaired. I don't, with as much as Teddy Prochazka has put into the game and the teammate that I know him to be, I don't think that I don't think he's going to hang it up. I think that he'll try to make another comeback, and next year will be year 5 in the program, and this is the third year out of 4 that he's had a season-ending injury, and to have it happen so early, and really none of them have happened late in the season. You saw it happen mid-season his first year, but he just broke into the lineup 1 week before that. So it's concerning for sure that this has continued to happen to him, and that it's happened, without a ton of wear and tear in games. He started 10 games in his career at Nebraska. 5 of them were last year after Turner Corcoran went down with a knee injury of his own, and now Corcoran, who's got 31 career starts on the Nebraska offensive line. So there is an experienced guy there alongside Teddy. And Turner was working with the number 1 offensive line on Saturday night at the practice. So Nebraska plugs in or keeps a player with a lot of experience at that left tackle spot, but what you lose is flexibility and depth. And if there's even one injury at offensive tackle now moving forward for the rest of the season, the Huskers are going to have to go with someone who's young and inexperienced.
So we've heard that Turner Corcoran's going to be moving around the offensive line there too, and obviously you mentioned there that depth is going to be a concern. Who needs to step up, or who's that next guy up that the offensive line will call upon to replace Teddy Prochazka, or at least maybe make them a faster track to getting ready?
Yeah, I don't know that Turner's going to move around now. He would have if he didn't win the job, although he was certainly in contention to win it, and now it's his. He's the guy they're going to look to unless there's something unexpected that happens over the next few weeks. But they're going to need some young players to step up. It starts with Gunnar Gatula, who was playing backup at right tackle to Bryce Benhart in the opening days of camp here, and I imagine that they're going to want to get Gunnar Gatula ready to be able to play both sides of the offensive line, or perhaps they'll keep him on the right side and they'll go with somebody else as the backup on the left side. You could look at Tyler Kanak, who's a second-year player at Nebraska, a transfer from Utah, but also a young guy. He was playing guard the other night, but has experience at tackle, and he's somebody that Nebraska believes in as an offensive tackle. They could go and try to get Jacob Hood ready, a transfer from Georgia, like Kanak, who's in his second year in the program and has dealt with more than his share of injuries in his college career. But he's healthy right now, and if they can keep him that way, then he's absolutely a promising prospect to somebody that Georgia signed out of high school. And I'd look probably next at Grant Segrin, who is another second year player, redshirted last season, put on a lot of weight, a walk-on, who has impressed Nebraska in his short time in Lincoln. So they believe in him and believe in his future, but the plan was probably not going into 2024 to see him in a role where he had to take a lot of reps. It could be the case at some point this year if Nebraska doesn't stay healthy in front of him.
Mitch, love talking Husker football with you. I do have one volleyball question. And of course, the Husker documentary coming out on E60 later this month. Everyone's excited about this, going to see the past season as behind the lens of an ESPN camera. I'm curious, do you have any insight? Do you know what kind of looks we're going to be given as fans that we might not have already seen just with the access that the Huskers grant with everything that goes on, all the different cameras that have been on volleyball day and everything else? So what else could we see from last year's volleyball team leading into this year?
Well, I know John Cook's excited about it. And he's talked about it for several months about how they had ESPN with them behind the scenes. And just watching the trailer, you can get a sense that, I think they went deep into a number of the personal stories that Nebraska players have. And part of the incredible season that Nebraska enjoyed last year, of course, is that there were no seniors on that team. And that they went undefeated from all the way up until the national championship game against Texas. The stadium match was what kind of set things in motion for it to be a great story, but I'm sure all of that's going to be covered, and I don't know. I don't have insight into exactly what they focused on, but I mean, you can bet if it's an ESPN documentary and knowing the amount of time, or having a sense of the amount of time that they that Nebraska gave to ESPN in this project, that you're going to get to learn a lot, not just about the team, but about all the individuals and the compelling stories that we've heard some about, but we'll probably go deeper when this thing airs later this month.
Mitch Sherman of The Athletic joining us on the Connor Happer Show. Always appreciate your time, Mitch. Appreciate your insight. I was very excited that you were on the docket today. You're a person I've always wanted to chat with, so glad we got that taken care of. And make sure you're checking out Mitch's work online with The Athletic as well. So have yourself a wonderful rest of your Wednesday, and appreciate your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Take care, Austin.